Hey everyone, welcome to Buzzing About Romance, a quick shot of romance. I am Becky, and joining me for this episode is Carolina. Hi, Carolina.
Hey, Becky. I am so excited for this one.
Yeah, I'm interested to talk to you about this book. It's been on my TBR for a while, pretty
hmm
much since it came out. I think that, and we'll get into it, but I think that I knew that this was going to be a little bit more of an emotional read and a taxing read.
hmm
So it was easy to put off, right? We all have those books that we're like,
Right?
I'll just wait till next time. So on this episode of A Quick Shot of Romance, we are reviewing The Kingmaker by Kennedy Ryan. This is book one in the All the King's Men duet. I am reading this book for the very first time, and I have not started book two until tonight after we record this. Um, the Rebel King will drop on October 17th, and this episode will contain spoilers for book one only. So if you're
Okay, wait a
listening,
second. When is this episode dropping? For the Kingmaker.
The Kingmaker is dropping October 10th. So people are
Oh,
listening
okay.
to this
Yep.
October 10th.
Okay.
And
And
then
then
the follow up will happen on 10/17,
17.
a week later. But we are going to spoil book one in this episode. We're going to talk about all the things in it, including the cliffhanger.
Yes.
Um,
And interestingly enough, when you look at the series on Amazon, it's actually a 3-book series, but book 1 and 2 are the same characters, Maxim and Lennox. Book 3 is her partner.
I
And
remember
I'm blanking on her, Kimba.
Kimba.
So,
I wondered.
but yes, book 3 is Kimba, the Queen Move. Um, so yeah. So book 1 and 2 are the same couple.
Okay. We will link the synopsis of the book in our on the shelf show notes at buzzingaboutromance.com. So, release date. I'm a little salty at Amazon right now, FYI, just so we know. Okay.
Okay.
The release date, the first time this book released was October 25th, 2019. Now, there is a new edition that's called the Bloom Edition, which released May 23rd, 2023.
Yep. Has new covers.
It has new covers. So, I had the Kingmaker on my Kindle, the original version.
Yep. I did too.
And then I went and bought the new Bloom
Yep.
version.
Yep.
So this is a review on the Bloom version, not on the original. So if I think she updated
Well,
storylines and added some content to it.
so, and here's the interesting thing too, because I probably 75% of this I audiobooked and 25% I read because I bought the audiobook, but that synced with the original version, not the Bloom version.
Yeah.
So it's not it was a little complicated.
Was a little complicated. So the tropes in this book are instant connection. This is an age gap. This is I'm going to say this is new adult romance for me because she is young when it starts.
When it starts,
Part one.
And even part one has book one, let me rephrase, book one, because book one has 3 parts in it.
Yeah.
And those 3 parts span over 14, 15 years?
Yeah. I think it's a 15-year timeline.
A 15-year timeline. So now book 2 doesn't have that same, it stays all within the same, very similar timelines. But yeah. So it starts as new adult, but by the time you get to part 3, it's no longer there.
I think we give some grace if we say new adult because I have issues with Maxim. So.
Well, okay, yes. No, I know where you're going
We
with
give
that.
him grace because dude made me mad. This is a slow burn. It is a bit forbidden and it is a political romance.
And I would also classify it as there's a second chance element of it. I think that's the interesting storytelling part of this, is that I don't think we would traditionally get, if this was a 1-book story, we wouldn't get like book part 1 and 2 of this.
I disagree because I just recently
I
read
I,
Jill
I think we would
Ramsauer.
get flashbacks, but I don't know that we would get.
No, Jill Ramsauer just had a book. Heather and I did a quick show on it, Ruthless Stranger. It alternates the timeline. So there is a
Mhm.
way for authors to do this without sectioning.
Yeah.
But you're right, there is a second chance element, and because it's the same two characters.
Mhm.
Um, but I've seen it done in one book, even recently. I don't think it's
Okay.
back in 2009. It might have been a newer way to do it, but currently, I think it's something that lots of authors are using. It's actually one of my so. I will say, in the structure of this book, I liked how she sectioned it into parts.
I did too. Okay, and I think we also need to clarify that this is first time read for Becky. This is a reread for me, and it's one that I've been like once in a blue moon, I can harp Becky to say, you need to read this, you need to read this, you need to read this. So this is a reread for me. But I would agree that I do like how she sections it because it makes the timeline very clear.
Well, and I don't like flashbacks in romance. That's one of my current gripes. Lots of authors are using flashbacks in a way to tell us things as readers instead of showing us. And I would rather have it be shown in snippets or do it like this. Give me
Yeah.
sections. I feel like a lot of times with flashbacks, we're taken out of the moment of the book and put back into somewhere else. Whereas this book, it was kind of like a piece of music because you have the prelude and
Mm-hmm.
then it just
Mm-hmm.
slowly continues to build and build and build. And then we get to the end and there are some high moments and some low moments within the story. But then there's this huge crescendo at the very end
Yes.
that leaves you and you're waiting for what is this grand finale. And I think by doing that in parts, she's able to create that kind of momentum for this story. Had it
I
been
would agree.
had it been done in
Yeah.
flashbacks, I think we would have been starting over every time we were back in the present day.
I would agree with that. And I would also say that um, one of the things I liked about these books is that we really get to sit with these characters and and build a connection with them in a very deep way, and learn their history. Like we follow their history, right? So instead of doing flashbacks or doing like, you know, showing timelines or, adjusting timelines, you really get to, um, I feel like you really get to experience it right alongside with them.
Yeah. I think especially when it comes to Lennox, like we feel her moments. Her moments are very dynamic in this book. Um, okay, so put out percentage was 28%. It's point of view, first person. Um, is it just single point of view, or do we just mostly get? No, we got some Maxim points of
Me
view
too.
too.
It's dual.
It's
It's
dual.
dual.
The audiobook narrators, which I did listen to some of this,
Oh,
and read,
so
it just
good.
depended. It was Jason Clark and Joe Raylan. And hello, Jason Clark.
I like Jason Clark. I like Jason Clark, period. But I really like him when we get into like when this book got into part 3, because then
Mm-hmm.
I really felt like Jason Clark voice fit that version of Maxim really well.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I could see that.
when it was the younger kind of part 1 and part 2,
Yeah.
I felt like it was just a little bit I mean, I suffered through it because it was Jason Clark, but no, I'm just kidding. But like he's much younger, and Jason Clark has a maturity and a gruffness in his voice
Yeah.
that I think fit better. And so when we're talking about between the two books, we're talking about like it fits with him for 75% of the book, right? Between the two,
Yeah.
75% of the story between the two. Now, I will have to say, Joe, what's her
Raylan.
last name?
Raylan.
Raylan impeccable performance. This, I don't feel like this was a narration. I feel like this was a performance, because this, there's very few narrators. There's tons of narrators I love, but I feel like they're doing narration of the book. And there's like a handful that I say that it is a character performance. And she really brought another dimension to Lennox.
I liked her as Lennox. Um, it took me a minute. I started with audio first. And there is some, that first 5 chapters, really part 1,
Mm-hmm.
is emotionally taxing. And it feels like emotional dump. Like you are feeling, especially in this book, that we're dealing with some very real life cultural experiences, right? This book
Cultural and
start
social issues. Yeah.
We're starting off with, the colonization and the theft of land of the indigenous people. We're talking about water rights and the fact that the federal government continues to, fight against these native sovereign countries that are within our borders that we're not caring for the treaties the way we should. And then the indigenous women that continue systematically to go missing and nobody's doing anything. On top of this young girl trying to find her place in this world,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of straddling the two lines of her dad's white world and her mother's indigenous world. And
Her mother and her aunt, because her, we learn in the story, her mother is one of those women that go missing.
yeah, it was a
And
lot, those
it,
first. So it took me till midway through part 2 to settle in with the narration.
well, and I think that this is one of the things that when I read this book, I wasn't expecting the depth of the story and the forward facing cultural and social issues that it brings up. And it really, part of me is shame on me, right? Like it it brought some of this to the front that I just don't think about, because it's not part of my day to day.
Yeah.
It's not part of my heritage and my upbringing. And it really, I would say we also get into part 2 where Maxim's passion for clean energy and what's going on with the world in that sense of climate change and what he's passionate about. You're really dealing with some heavy topics, which this book won't be for everybody. This series won't be for everybody, but I think it's a very eye-opening and powerful read in that sense, because
It's a voice we're not hearing. It's absolutely a voice we're not
yes.
hearing. It's not something we expect to hear in romance. Um, I'm glad she done it. Kennedy Ryan does not shy away from big issues, right? We know this in her long
Mm-mm.
shot series or in her hoop series. Um, the one thing I will say is, if you are an empath, a true empath type person that just feels every emotion as they read a book, I am not that usually emotionally connected into a book. Like, I feel emotion, but
Mhm.
we all make fun of me because I don't cry or get emotional over things. Um, I had to take this book in sections. I had to
Mhm.
take this book moments at a time, because it was overwhelming for me, because there's this sense that, like, of helplessness as the reader. Like, how do I help? How do I make this better? And the way that Kennedy Ryan writes these
Yeah.
characters in this book, that you just want, especially Lennox. Like,
Mhm.
so here's the breakdown of just who Lennox is. In part 1 of the book, she is 17 years old. Maxim is 24. They meet at an a pipeline protest that is happening on her indigenous nation's
Reservation.
land reservation. Maxim's dad is the owner of the pipeline that is violating the treaty, but he has federal government permission to do this. And Maxim realizes that his dad is sicking rabid dogs onto the people that are protesting, and Maxim inserts himself into the protest, and everyone just assumes that he is just there to protest.
Well, yeah, and because, he separates from, he's captivated by Lennox because Lennox is speaking, and even at 17 she's got a strong and powerful voice. He separates from the dad because he sees what's happening, and he wants to go help. So he gets arrested alongside of them, and they just assume, and he doesn't correct because he also knows with his last name and his dad's corporation that it could be trouble. But he's so captivated by Lennox that...
Which, that was a little icky. I didn't need that. I'm just going to say he's 24, she was 17.
Well, and he didn't know that until later. And
it still felt a little icky.
Well, he didn't know that. And once he realized it, he pulled back.
He did.
In the storyline.
Lennox, her as a character is fairly phenomenal. She's so smart and principled, at least in part 1 and part 2.
Okay.
But in part 3, this integrity that she has feels like it can be bought a little bit when she goes to work for his brother.
How do you see that?
Well, because as we lead up to this, there's the meet cute there's the re-meeting in Amsterdam, which is where she loses her virginity to Maxim. Maxim goes off to the Arctic.
And I have to say, they have this week in Amsterdam is a powerful week for them, because I think it is in their storyline, because they go deeper into their connection. They talk more. It wasn't planned. And
it really shows their passion for who they want to be as they move forward into the world. And it does have that misconnection when he has left for the day and she has to go home for an opportunity. So there were definitely, I feel like Amsterdam was needed to bring some lightness, love, and passion to this story, especially after part 1.
Right.
It was kind of like the interlude of...
And there's that little tension cliffhanger at the end of part 2 that goes into part, before part 3, the reveal that it's not his reveal of that he's a Cade.
Yeah, that he's a Cade.
So
in the book, when she is pursued by Maxim's brother in order to come work on his presidential campaign as a campaign manager, because she has now positioned herself as someone that is working very hard to get marginalized voices into office, right? She's built her whole resume. She wrote a book with her partner about getting women and people of color into political office, into positions to make choices to help these First Nations, to help marginalized voices find representation, right? That's who she is. She is the woman you call to run your campaign to get marginal voices heard, right?
Right. Her and Kimba. Their agency firm.
Yeah, their firm.
Whatever.
But she's pursued by Cades to help him run his presidential campaign, which she took it, because that's prestige, and she feels like she'll have a better voice and bigger reputation and then be in part a power. But he absolutely represents everything she has worked so hard to systematically take down. white men, oil people. You know, it felt like her integrity was a
See,
little
and I feel
purchasable.
it, yes and no, but I feel like they address that in the story. And in that, when you look at his record on what he can do, when you think about getting somebody into the White House and helping them, he's committed as much to that as possible because he knows he has a voice. Um, so I wasn't as bothered by it.
It just made me, I think it shows that, like, as we mature, we all know that we're going to have to move. Like, we have young idolization, ideal,
We have to make
and we have to
compromises.
make compromises because we have to put clothes on our back and, you know, with work creates. And I get that. Like, it made sense in the character journey. I just wanted her to be more, I guess maybe I felt like she caved very quickly on it.
I could see that.
And that's a
Yeah,
page, you know, it's a matter of page and edits. There might have been more
right.
scenes. We don't know. I just wanted more, I just wanted maybe to see more of her fighting against it a little bit, I guess. Um,
I also think that there's points where we just have to move the storyline along to
absolutely.
get to
Absolutely.
stuff, you know.
So let's talk about Maxim real quick because I don't, at the end of this book, at the end of this cliffhanger, and we'll get to the cliffhanger part, I don't like him. Like, so he has integrity and he fights hard for what he believes in, right? Like, his goal is clean energy, clean air. He fights against his father. He actually does not represent himself into the world as a Cade. He uses whatever the other last name is that he has.
Kingsman. He uses his
Kingsman.
middle name.
Yeah, he uses his middle name and he very much clearly moves himself very far away from his father and his father's influence into the world. Um, and I liked that. Uh,
I,
but
I feel like he's much more of an enigma, which I think is why you probably don't like him as much because there's a lot that, and it's kind of glossed over a little bit, probably because of, you know, page, like there are probably edits of how much had happened in those 10 years. Because at one point he says, you know, he's going to come back for her. And it was like he kind of went dark for 10 years. And he talks a little bit about it, but I think that makes him okay, what really did happen? What's really going on? We don't know as much about him as we do about Lennox.
yeah. So I think what bugs me about him is she accepted him back with minimal effort from him. I'm big for a grand gesture and a grovel. You know that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted him to grovel more. I feel like she
Okay.
just kind of took him back and didn't grovel enough. Um, and I think part of that comes into, so I will say I felt like that third book, once she accepts the position and up and until the cliffhanger, there's some kind of dragging points in there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the pacing of the book is a little slow right there.
Yeah, and that third part, yeah.
Yeah. But I do feel like this was more than a romance. It's really a family. It dives into heritage, culture, diversity, loss, hope, and love. Um, and I think that those were just as important as the romance in this book.
I would agree. I would
Um,
agree.
okay, so let's real quick because we touched on it before we get to the cliffhanger because this episode's run a little long. So there is a 10-year leap, and it felt unnecessary. I felt like 5, 7. The 10 years, and then the fact that he didn't even make any effort, that he went dark for 10 years. I don't know. And then he didn't grovel. Like, there were just these little things that I'm like, Jesus, Joseph and Mary, dude.
Um, okay. Because I have read book two. Um, I think 10 years was a long time, but I also think that when you think about Kimba and Lennox's career, you needed those jumps. You needed that for them to be that at the forefront of what they're doing with political candidates. They needed that time. Because if you think about it, elections happen every 2 to 4 years, right? So you needed enough time for them to make a name for themselves that they would potentially work on and lead a presidential campaign, right? Otherwise, 5-7 years wouldn't be plausible.
No, but it could have been, at least in this first part of this book, as little political intrigue as we've had in it, or political storyline. It could have been a senator case. He could have been a congressman and then gone into as a senator or a governor or something. Yeah. It just, for just the Lennox and Maxim part, not necessarily like their storylines and who they are, it felt very much, I'll do my own thing, you do yours, and then we'll come back together, and I, Maxim, am going to demand that you give me a second chance, and you aren't going to fight me. And I felt like that pretty much rounds up part 3. But then there's this cliffhanger, and I hated the cliffhanger, not because it was a cliffhanger.
Okay.
I think the whole kidnapped in the jungle and why she was on that mission in the middle of a very big client launch and political thing. Like, I know people in politics, they wouldn't allow their campaign manager to go off to the jungle for 6 weeks. Like, right. It felt like she needed something to cause drama, but she didn't want it to be angst between the two characters. It needed to be an outside source. So, get kidnapped in the jungle. I don't know. I really felt disconnected. And maybe it'll be cleared up in book 2. But in all honesty, if we weren't doing these quick shots, that cliffhanger made me mad enough that I might not have read book 2.
No.
Yeah, I'm that mad about that cliffhanger. It was so stupid, in my opinion.
Okay. I
love everything else, and I want to see how we get to their HEA. But this kidnapped in the jungle thing, I don't know, it felt like 1990s soap opera drama.
And when was this book released?
2019.
Okay.
It just, I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't love that.
I can't say anything.
That's fine. I just hope that she figures it out, because as of right now, like, going into, I could forgive the pacing issues of section 3. I could, the age, the beginning, all of that stuff. Like, I could deal with the 10 years and all of that. Mm-hmm. This kidnapping, I'm just like, this is dumb. I feel like there's just other things she could have used for outside source. I don't know. I just don't love this choice.
Okay.
So that's just where I'm at.
All right.
But you like the cliffhanger then, I take it? Like, if you look at just that section of it, like, not anything leading up to it, just she goes to the jungle for 6 weeks on this medical mission.
I think that speaks to her commitments, like, because she had already long before she committed to this campaign, she committed to this, going to help her friend's brother and her ex-boyfriend on this mission trip. I like that she connects with the girls and, she bonds and helps them, I think that speaks to her nature. I don't know. There's a little adventure part in it that was this the best choice? I don't know. I don't have as strong feelings as Becky does.
Just, if you're going to have a cliffhanger, make it make sense. And that felt like it didn't make sense.
But yes, I that's all I'm going to say at this point.
Okay.
I know some stuff.
Okay. Join us back here October 17th for The Rebel King. I will be reading that, and we will record that episode after I read it. So, and then we'll let you know what we think of this duet. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Until next time, everyone, happy reading.
Find us on Instagram at Buzzing About Romance or on Twitter at Buzzing Romance. If If you like the podcast, please leave a review. If you'd like to support us directly, join the Bookcase and Coffee Patreon and receive exclusive content only available to Patreon members. Check out bookcaseandcoffee.com for our on-the-shelf show notes.